Every day we wake up to news that reminds us of how fragile life truly is. Today, the world lost four remarkable American legends, people who inspired us, entertained us, and shaped our culture in ways we'll never forget. Their stories remind us that greatness isn't about how long we live. It's about the mark we leave behind. It was a quiet morning in Shelbyville, Kentucky. The sun rose gently over the autumn fields, casting a soft golden glow over the town that had watched one of its brightest daughters grow. The news came with quiet sadness. Former Kentucky Governor Layne Collins had passed away peacefully. Across the state, flags lowered, voices softened, and hearts remembered. Layne Collins was more than a political figure. She was a symbol of grace, leadership, and determination. A woman who believed deeply that Kentucky could be more, and that its people deserved the chance to prove it. Born on December 7, 1936, in a modest home in Shelby County, Martha Layne Hall was raised in a world that often underestimated what women could do. But her parents taught her something different, that kindness and hard work mattered more than status. From those early years, she learned that service was not about ambition. It was about purpose. She grew up surrounded by the values of small-town life, church on Sundays, family dinners, and neighbors who looked out for one another. Those roots shaped her spirit and her quiet strength. Even as a young girl, Martha showed signs of leadership. Teachers remembered her as calm, thoughtful, and focused, the kind of student who listened before she spoke. After graduating from Shelbyville High School, she attended the University of Kentucky, where her love for education grew. There, she met her husband, Dr. Bill Collins, a dentist who shared her belief in the power of community. Together, they would build not only a family, but a shared commitment to public service. In the early years, Martha worked as a school teacher, a profession she often said was her first calling. Her time in the classroom shaped her vision of what Kentucky could become. She saw the hopes of her students, their struggles, and the limits placed on their opportunities. She believed education could change that. Her political journey began not from ambition, but from a quiet sense of responsibility. Encouraged by friends and community members, she stepped into local politics, first volunteering for campaigns, then serving in small leadership roles. Her calm voice and steady presence earned her respect. She listened before she led, a rare quality in politics then and now. By the 1970s, her name was being spoken in state circles. She became active in Democratic politics and, in time, was chosen as lieutenant governor under John Y. Brown, Jr. It was a historic step, one that put her just a heartbeat away from the highest office in the state. When she ran for governor in 1983, few believed she could win. But those who underestimated her soon learned that Martha Layne Collins had something far stronger than political ambition. She had purpose and perseverance. Her campaign was quiet, focused, and dignified. She spoke not of rivalry, but of renewal, and in 1983, history was made. Martha Layne Collins became the 56th governor of Kentucky, and the first woman ever to hold that title. Her victory was not just political. It was deeply personal for women across the South, who saw in her a reflection of their own unspoken potential. In her inauguration speech, she spoke softly but firmly. This is not about being the first woman governor. It's about being the best governor I can be for all the people of Kentucky. Her words set the tone for a leadership that would be remembered for progress, integrity, and vision. During her 4-year term, Collins focused on education, economic development, and global partnerships. Her most defining achievement came when she convinced the Japanese automaker Toyota to build its first American plant in Georgetown, Kentucky. That decision transformed the state's economy forever. Thousands of jobs were created, and generations of Kentuckians found stability and pride in work that reshaped their communities. It was a turning point, not just for the economy, but for the state's self-image. Former colleague and friend Steve Beshear once said, "Martha Layne saw something the rest of us didn't. She believed Kentucky could be world-class. And she made us believe it too." Her education initiatives also left a lasting mark. She strengthened public schools, improved teacher pay, and expanded access to higher education. For her, education wasn't a political talking point. It was the foundation of progress. As governor, she carried herself with quiet dignity. She faced criticism at times, as all leaders do, but she never lost her composure or her sense of purpose. Even her political opponents often admitted admiration for her calmness and sincerity. When her term ended in 1987, She stepped away from the political spotlight with the same grace she had brought to it. She didn't seek further office. Instead, she returned to what she loved most, education. She became president of St. Catherine College, guiding young minds and shaping future leaders with the wisdom earned through years of public service. Throughout her later years, she continued to inspire. She spoke often about women in leadership, urging young girls to believe in themselves and never see gender as a limitation. "You don't have to wait for permission," she once told a group of students. "Just be ready when the opportunity comes." Her words echoed far beyond the walls of that college gymnasium. In her personal life, Layne Collins remained deeply connected to her family and her faith. She was a devoted mother and grandmother, finding joy in the quiet moments, watching her grandchildren play, tending to her garden, or visiting old friends in Shelbyville. Even in retirement, she never stopped advocating for her state. Whether it was speaking at events, mentoring young leaders, or supporting educational programs, she stayed active in shaping Kentucky's future. When news of her passing broke, tributes poured in from across the nation. Governors, senators, teachers, and citizens all remembered her as a woman who carried herself with both power and grace. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear shared heartfelt words. Layne Collins showed generations of Kentuckians what true leadership looks like. Her vision and courage transformed our state, and her legacy will live on in every classroom and every community she touched. Across social media, the younger generation reflected on her trailblazing spirit. One tribute read, "She walked so others could run. Thank you, Governor Collins, for opening doors that will never close again." Her funeral service in Shelbyville was simple and dignified, much like her life. Friends, family, and former colleagues gathered to honor her memory. A soft hymn played as the congregation bowed their heads, remembering a woman who led not by force, but by example. As the service ended, the air outside the church felt still. The people of Kentucky stood quietly, some with tears, others with small smiles, each carrying their own memory of the woman who had once led them with such strength and humility. For many, Layne Collins will forever be remembered not just as Kentucky's first female governor, but as a teacher at heart, one who taught through action that courage and compassion can coexist in leadership. Her life story stands as a reminder that breaking barriers isn't about making noise. It's about making change, decades from now. When people drive past the Toyota plant in Georgetown, or walk through a Kentucky classroom filled with promise, her influence will still be there, quiet but enduring. Layne Collins leaves behind a legacy built not on power, but on progress. Not on titles, but on trust. She believed in people. She believed in possibility. And as Kentucky says goodbye to its First Lady of Leadership, her words still ring true. If we dream together, we can build something that lasts. In the gentle rhythm of her life, from the classrooms of Shelbyville to the governor's mansion in Frankfort, Layne Collins proved that true leadership is not measured in years of service, but in lives uplifted. Her journey has ended, but her story continues. In every student she inspired, every woman she empowered, and every Kentuckian who dares to dream of a brighter tomorrow. Rest in peace, Governor Collins. Your light will forever shine across the hills of Kentucky. The news came quietly, carried across radio waves and news feeds on an October morning. Susan Stamberg, the warm, familiar voice that guided generations through decades of news and storytelling, had passed away. She was 86 years old. Across the country, in cars, kitchens, and newsrooms, people paused. For many, her voice had been part of their daily lives. Calm, curious, and full of life. It was a sound that once defined what radio journalism could be. Susan Stamberg wasn't just a broadcaster. She was a pioneer, a storyteller, and one of the first women to become a household name through the power of public radio. Her voice was steady and bright, carrying the weight of truth with grace and humor. Born on September 7, 1938, in Newark, New Jersey, Susan grew up with a love of words and sound. She studied English literature at Barnard College, graduating in 1959, before stepping into a media landscape that was still dominated by men. But Susan never saw limits. She saw opportunities waiting to be discovered. Her path to national public radio began almost by chance. In 1971, she joined NPR as one of its earliest staff members, a new experiment in journalism at the time. Just 2 years later, she became co-host of All Things Considered, making history as the first woman to anchor a national nightly news program in the United States. It was a groundbreaking moment. But Susan didn't focus on the title. She focused on the work. Her voice became instantly recognizable, bright yet thoughtful, serious when the story demanded, and full of warmth when it didn't. She made listeners feel like she was speaking just to them. Her interviews were unlike anyone else's. Whether she was speaking with world leaders, artists, or ordinary people, she listened deeply. She once said, "A good interview isn't about asking clever questions. It's about really hearing what's being said and what isn't." Over the years, she covered everything: politics, culture, history, and the quiet human stories that filled the spaces in between. She believed that every story, no matter how small, deserved to be told with care. Colleagues often described her as fearless but kind. She could challenge presidents one moment and laugh about cranberry relish recipes. The next, a beloved annual tradition that began almost by accident when she shared her mother-in-law's unusual recipe live on air. That recipe, involving cranberries, horseradish, and a blender, became a Thanksgiving legend. But beyond the laughter and light moments, Susan carried deep conviction about journalism. She wanted NPR to be more than news. She wanted it to be a bridge, a place where people could understand each other, even when they disagreed. When she spoke about her work, she often said she was driven by curiosity. "I've always wanted to know what makes people tick," she once told an interviewer. "That's the joy of this job. You get to ask questions and you get to learn." That sense of wonder never left her. Even after stepping down as co-host in 1986, she continued contributing to NPR as a special correspondent. Her stories, rich with empathy and humor, reminded listeners that news could be both informative and human. She received countless honors during her career: induction into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame, the Edward R. Murrow Award, and multiple lifetime achievement recognitions. But what mattered most to her was that people listened, that her stories made them think, laugh, or feel less alone. For women in journalism, Susan Stamberg was a door opener. She proved that authority could sound like warmth, that intelligence could coexist with compassion, and that a woman's voice belonged on the airwaves just as much as any man's. When news of her passing spread, tributes came from every corner of media. NPR's current CEO shared, "Susan didn't just help build NPR, she helped shape its soul. Her voice defined our sound, and her spirit defined our mission." Fellow journalist Nina Totenberg, who had worked alongside her for decades, said through tears, "She made it possible for all of us to be here. Susan taught us that journalism could be fearless and kind at the same time." Listeners, too, shared their memories. On social media, one post read, "I grew up hearing her voice every evening on the radio. She made the world feel smaller, safer, like someone was out there making sense of it for us." Her legacy reaches far beyond her recordings. In every young journalist who sits behind a microphone for the first time, there's a trace of Susan's influence, a reminder that honesty and heart can live in the same sentence. Even in her later years, she remained engaged and curious. She appeared often at NPR events, college lectures, and journalism conferences, always ready to encourage new voices to step forward. When asked what advice she had for aspiring reporters, she smiled and said, "Listen harder. People will always tell you more if you really listen." That advice, simple and profound, became a kind of mantra across NPR. Susan Stamberg's passing leaves a silence that feels almost physical, the kind of quiet that follows when a familiar song ends. But her work remains. Thousands of archived interviews, recordings, and broadcasts continue to inspire, teach, and comfort. Through her words and her warmth, she taught a nation to pay attention, not just to headlines, but to the humanity behind them. She turned sound into storytelling, and in doing so, helped define an entire generation of public radio. As her colleagues and listeners say goodbye, they also celebrate. They celebrate the laughter she brought, the insight she offered, and the courage she carried into every studio she entered. Susan Stamberg once reflected on her long career, saying, "I've had the privilege of asking questions for a living, but the real privilege was being trusted with people's answers." Today, her own story becomes part of the history she helped tell, a story of curiosity, compassion, and courage. In homes where her voice once played softly through speakers, there's now a quiet gratitude. Gratitude for the woman who gave a voice to the unheard, who turned conversation into connection, and who helped build one of the most trusted institutions in American journalism. As the radio fades to silence, her legacy echoes on, not just in sound, but in spirit. Susan Stamberg's voice may have gone still, but what she stood for will never fade. She reminded us that listening, truly listening, is one of the most powerful acts we can share. Her story ends, but her sound lives on. In the archives of NPR, in the hearts of listeners, and in the next generation of journalists who will carry her light forward, one question at a time. Rest peacefully, Susan Stamberg, the voice of a generation, forever remembered in every frequency that still dares to tell the truth with heart. The news came quietly from Detroit, a city she loved, served, and forever called home. Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, the respected former Congresswoman and longtime advocate for education and equality, had passed away. She was 79. Across Michigan, hearts grew heavy. Her name carried weight not just in politics, but in community, faith, and family. For decades, she stood as a voice of hope for Detroit, strong, compassionate, and unshakably proud of the people she represented. Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick's journey began far from Washington. She was born on June 25, 1945, in Detroit, Michigan, the daughter of a working-class family that believed deeply in faith, education, and service. Those early lessons shaped her life. She attended Detroit's public schools, where her natural leadership quickly stood out. Teachers described her as bright, determined, and always ready to speak up for others. She believed education was the key to freedom, and she would carry that belief throughout her career. After earning her bachelor's degree from Western Michigan University and later a master's in education from the University of Michigan, Carolyn began her career as a teacher in Detroit public schools. In those classrooms, she saw firsthand the challenges young people faced: poverty, inequality, limited opportunity, but she also saw promise, the potential in every student who just needed someone to believe in them. That belief fueled her lifelong mission. In the late 1970s, Carolyn decided to take her passion for change beyond the classroom. Encouraged by her community, she ran for the Michigan House of Representatives. Her campaign was small, but her message was powerful. She would fight for fairness, for education, and for the families of Detroit. She won. Her 18 years in the Michigan legislature built her reputation as a determined advocate who worked across lines to get things done. She fought for better schools, affordable housing, and safer neighborhoods. She became known as the people's representative, someone who would listen, understand, and take those stories straight to the Capitol. In 1996, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick took her fight to Washington, D.C. She was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where she served for more than a decade representing Michigan's 13th district. Her arrival in Congress marked not just a personal milestone, but a new chapter for Detroit's political voice. She brought with her the sound of her city, its struggles, its spirit, and its hope. In Washington, she served on key committees, including appropriations, one of the most powerful in Congress. Her focus was always clear: improving education, creating jobs, and ensuring that Detroit received its fair share of resources. She was never afraid to speak boldly, even when it wasn't easy. Colleagues often admired her quiet strength. She wasn't one for grandstanding or spotlight moments. Instead, she built relationships, earned respect, and worked tirelessly behind the scenes to deliver results. During her years in Congress, she also served as chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, a role that highlighted her commitment to representation and equity. She used that platform to champion civil rights, economic justice, and opportunities for the next generation. But beyond policy, Carolyn was deeply human. She cared about people: the single mother trying to make ends meet, the student dreaming of college, the senior struggling with healthcare. She understood their stories because she lived among them. Her son, Kwame Kilpatrick, would later follow her path into public service, becoming mayor of Detroit. Their bond was strong, rooted in shared values of faith and community, though their lives took different turns in the public eye. Despite challenges and political storms, Carolyn never lost her faith or her composure. Those who knew her described her as calm, prayerful, and grounded in love for her city. Former Detroit councilwoman Joanne Watson once said, "Carolyn never wavered. Through every test, she stood tall, because her foundation was built on purpose and on God. After leaving Congress in 2011, Carolyn continued to mentor young leaders, often reminding them that public service is not about power, it's about people. She stayed active in education and civic life, attending community meetings, speaking at universities, and quietly guiding the next generation of Black women in leadership. In her later years, she found joy in family, her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Her faith remained her anchor. Friends say she never stopped praying for Detroit's future. When news of her passing broke, tributes poured in from across Michigan and beyond. Governor Gretchen Whitmer shared, "Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick dedicated her life to lifting up others. Her leadership opened doors for countless women and helped build the foundation for progress in our state." Former colleague and civil rights leader John Conyers once described her as a steady force in uncertain times, someone who could turn compassion into policy and faith into action. On social media, a former student wrote, "She taught me that my voice mattered. Even now when I speak up, I hear her saying, 'Don't whisper your truth, speak it with pride.'" Those tributes reflected who she truly was, not just a politician, but a teacher in every sense of the word. Her story is also a story of Detroit itself, resilient, proud, and forever hopeful. Through decades of change, Carolyn stood as a symbol of what leadership looks like when it's rooted in community. She believed in progress through representation, in fairness through empathy, in leadership through service. And she proved that women, especially Black women, could shape the course of history not just by being present, but by leading with purpose. As Detroit says goodbye, her legacy continues in every classroom she once taught in, every policy she helped shape, and every young woman who dares to run for office believing she too can make a difference. Her life reminds us that true leadership doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply shows up, every day, with courage, compassion, and consistency. Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick's journey, from teacher to congresswoman, from mother to mentor, is a testament to resilience and service. She leaves behind more than achievements. She leaves a legacy of empowerment, reminding generations that change begins with faith, hard work, and the courage to care. As the city lights of Detroit shine tonight, her spirit lives on in every act of kindness, in every student who dares to dream, and in every leader who follows her example. Rest in peace. Congresswoman Kilpatrick, the voice of Detroit's hope. Your light will never fade. It was a quiet morning in Cambridge when the news was confirmed. Sir John Gurdon, one of the most remarkable scientists of the modern era, had passed away at the age of 92. His death marked the end of a chapter in scientific history, but not the end of his influence. Across laboratories and classrooms around the world, tributes began to appear. Scientists, students, and admirers reflected on the man who had once dared to challenge the impossible and succeeded. Sir John Gurdon was not just a biologist. He was a dreamer, a quiet revolutionary who changed how humanity understood life itself. His groundbreaking discovery, that mature cells could be reprogrammed to become young again, opened the door to modern stem cell research. His work would one day lead to potential cures for diseases that once felt untouchable: Parkinson's, diabetes, spinal injuries, and more. But behind every achievement was a man whose life began far from the halls of fame. John Bertrand Gurdon was born on October 2, 1933, in Dippenhall, England. As a young boy, he loved nature and the mysteries of the world around him. But in school, he struggled. In fact, his teachers once told him he was unsuited for science. That line would follow him for years, a reminder of how little others sometimes see in us and how much potential hides beneath doubt. He often recalled that moment with humor. "My biology teacher wrote that my ideas would never lead to success," he once said. "It's the only school report I've kept." Despite early discouragement, John Gurdon's curiosity never faded. He attended Eton College and later Christ Church, Oxford, where his passion for biology took root. He wanted to understand not just life as it was, but how it began and how it could be changed. In the 1950s, science had firm rules. One of them was that once a cell matured, like a skin or muscle cell, it could never go back to its original early state. Gurdon questioned that rule, and in questioning it, he changed the world. At the University of Oxford, he began an experiment that seemed almost impossible. He took the nucleus of a mature frog cell, one that had already grown up, and implanted it into an empty egg cell. The idea was simple, but the challenge was immense. To everyone's surprise, the egg began to divide. Then it developed into a full, living tadpole. In that moment, John Gurdon had proven something extraordinary, that the story of a cell wasn't fixed. It could be rewritten. Time, in a biological sense, could be reversed. His experiment in 1962 became one of the most important in the history of biology. It laid the foundation for the entire field of cloning and stem cell research. At first, his work faced skepticism. Many scientists couldn't believe it was possible. But over the years, his findings were repeated, expanded, and ultimately celebrated. His curiosity had triumphed over convention. In 2012, 50 years after his historic discovery, John Gurdon received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, shared with Japanese scientist Shinya Yamanaka. Together, their research proved that cells could be reprogrammed to become pluripotent, capable of turning into any cell in the body. It was a concept that redefined modern medicine. When he accepted his Nobel Prize, Gurdon stood on stage in Stockholm with quiet humility. "I was told as a boy that I would never succeed," he said softly. "So it is particularly nice that I have proved them wrong." His story inspired not only scientists, but dreamers everywhere. It was proof that failure, when met with persistence, can become the first step toward greatness. Colleagues often described him as gentle and endlessly curious. He worked long hours in the lab, even into his 80s, often surrounded by young researchers who saw in him not just a mentor, but a friend. Dr. Shinya Yamanaka, his Nobel laureate, once said, "Sir John showed us that the impossible could be done. Without his vision, the entire field of stem cell science would not exist." His laboratory at Cambridge became a place of discovery and of quiet wonder. Students remember him not for lectures about success, but for his belief in trying, failing, and trying again. Even after global fame, Gurdon never sought attention. He preferred the silence of microscopes and petri dishes to the noise of awards. He had a kind of calm curiosity, one former student wrote online. He taught us to question gently, but persistently, and to never accept that something can't be done just because it hasn't been done yet. Throughout his career, he received numerous honors, a knighthood in 1995, the Lasker Award, and countless fellowships. Yet he always carried himself with simplicity. When visitors entered his office, they often noticed that old-school report framed on his wall, the one that declared he would never be a scientist. It wasn't there out of pride. It was there as a reminder that one person's doubt should never define another's destiny. In later years, Gurdon continued to explore how cells could heal the body. His work inspired new therapies for regenerating tissues and treating diseases once thought incurable. When asked in an interview what drove him, he smiled and said, "Curiosity. Always curiosity. The world is too interesting to stop asking questions." He believed that science was not about answers, but about wonder, the endless pursuit of understanding how life works and how it can be made better. When the news of his passing spread, tributes came from every corner of the scientific world. The University of Cambridge called him a legend of modern biology and a beacon of inspiration. The Nobel Committee released a statement saying, "Sir John Gurdon's discoveries reshaped the boundaries of life. His work continues to guide science toward healing and hope." In laboratories around the world, researchers paused their work, some quietly reflecting, others sharing stories of how his experiments had inspired their own careers. Sir John Gurdon's legacy lives not only in textbooks and research papers, but in the minds of those who continue his quest, the young scientists who dare to challenge what seems impossible. He taught the world that biology, like life itself, is never fixed. That even the smallest cell holds infinite potential for renewal. As the sun set over Cambridge, where he spent most of his life, his absence was deeply felt. Yet in the quiet hum of the labs he once walked through, his spirit remains, a presence guiding every curious mind toward discovery. Sir John Gurdon's life reminds us that time can be rewritten, not just in cells, but in human destiny. He turned doubt into discovery, failure into triumph, and curiosity into a gift for all humankind. And as science continues to advance, every breakthrough in regenerative medicine carries a trace of his vision, a whisper of his belief that nothing in life is truly irreversible. Rest peacefully. Sir John Gurdon, the scientist who reversed time. Your legacy lives in every heartbeat renewed by hope, and every mind still brave enough to ask, what if?